Carbondale. Today is March 31st, 2021. Go ahead and there we go. Our guest speaker today is Lynden Schuyler of the Illinois Public Health Association to discuss the 2020 census with us. Thank you, Shane, for being our greeter today. It's now time for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Linda Meredith, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure, I will be glad to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Linda. It's time for our moment of reflection, and being that this is Women's History Month, it's the last day of Women's History Month, figured I'd go with our current Vice President, Kamala Harris. She recently said, "What I want young women and girls to know is you are powerful and your voice matters." And as the father of two daughters, I'm really excited that we have a female vice president. And regardless of anybody's political positions, I think it's great that we've got that progress. And I think she's a great example for my daughters and for girls everywhere. It's time for our Rotary song. And this week we're going to go with the old staple, R-O-T-A-R-Y. Here we go.
Rotary.
All right. And hopefully soon we'll be back in person. We can have Gil or somebody else on the piano and be able to get those songbooks back out. It's time for our introduction of guests. Shane, would you please introduce our guests today?
Yes, we have three guests with us today. We have Ms. Sharon Simon, a guest of Faith Miller. Welcome again to joining us today. We have traveling Rotarian R. Beck with us today. And we have our guest speaker, Linden. So all of guests are welcome. Thanks for joining us today with the Rotary Club of Carbondale.
Thank you.
Couple club announcements. The first is our 100 Little Things update. 61 projects are completed. The big one going on right now is 100 flashlights. Apparently I didn't actually add that one in here, but there's a great flyer for that Sharon Harris Johnson has been leading. Sharon, would you like to say a few words about the 100 flashlights? She's not with us today, is she? Did I miss that? Well, we'll get the link in the chat here shortly about those, but they can be brought to, I believe it's Mike Harris Country Financial Office. And my understanding is they're moving along pretty well with that flashlight drive. Big news for today. This is as of 10:30 this morning. Our Centennial celebration registration is live. So you can register for our Rotary Club of Carbondale virtual Centennial celebration. That will be Saturday, May 1st. So about 1 month from 31 days from today at 4 p.m. We've got a great program and we'll be kicking off our Centennial fundraising effort here in the next week or so as we reach out to folks to contribute to that. Christine, do you want to add anything?
I just hope everybody will plan to attend. We have some fun things planned. One is we will have a special artwork that has been created and we will be auctioning it off. We are fundraising for a new endowed fund that we're going to create within the club foundation so that our good works will live on and on and on. And it should be a fun time. It's only an hour. We're limiting it to an hour. So for those of you who spend hours on Zoom in meetings, it'll only be this one hour on Saturday the 1st.
Thank you, Christine. Our continuing service projects, the Carbondale Warming Center lunch sponsorship project. Heartland Catering's over there today, giving lunch to the residents there. Gail's not with us. He was going to try and jump on. Jerry, do you have anything additional that they need other than coffee, paper supplies for the warming center? You are muted, sir.
That's about it for now.
Okay. Foundation Donation Challenge. I want to thank Pam Umloff Brown for matching our club foundation donations up to $100 for March. Christine's got April covered. I still didn't. I'm gonna stop that share and update that right now because I'm not putting Gil down for something he's not doing. That is Jerry who's covering July. So I'm gonna update that right now and then reshare. But we've got Jerry Malumbi for July of 2021. And then I'm covering August of 2021. And we'd love to continue that on. So if you have not already signed up for the Foundation Donation Challenge, we'd love to add your name to that list.
Give me, my birthday's September month. That's the one I was wanting to get. You had me down for the wrong month. Put me down for September.
For September, look at that. I'm not even gonna share it yet. I'm gonna go right back into it and I'm gonna add Gil down. Anybody else while I still have the slideshow open before I reshare it here? No? All right. Hearing none, we'll go right back to that share. All right. So now we've got Jerry in July, I'm in August, and Gil September. Fantastic. We'll keep that ball rolling. Club Duty helping out week to week. Shane just posted these in the chat, so keep an eye on that chat and we'll update this before it gets sent out for the doodle polls. So please sign up for your club duties, just our virtual clipboard instead of handing that around each week. Satellite Club update, April 6th, they have Angie Bailey and Carrie Gale discussing COVID. They're doing a spring cleanup and youth education on topics such as everyday finances, banking, and energy efficiency. Brooke, would you like to add anything for updates for the Murfreesboro Satellite Club?
Not at this time. I think I've probably given an update since our last meeting. We are working on a district grant though.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brooke. Time for some district news. Our incoming district governor, our district governor-elect is Terry Mathias, who at one time was in our club. Now he's with the Jackson Williamson Sunset Club. So congratulations to Terry, and we'll keep up the great work at the district level. Rotary International news. We are continuing, the 2021-2022 theme is Serve to Change Lives. And a wild polio virus weekly update. As of March 24th of 2021, there were 2 children paralyzed by polio, one in Afghanistan, one in Pakistan. Compared to 2020, they had 140 children that were paralyzed by polio. So the Polio Plus effort is working. Let's continue to support that fund, and we will be able to eradicate polio. Now it's time for some of your good news. Who's got some good news to share today?
You, Mike.
Well, I have some news that's might be fun, but it is also kind of strange. I woke up Monday morning and was walking around, opening things up, and looked in our library, and there were books all over the floor because 5 shelves had pulled away from the wall and had toppled down. So that's what Patrick did Monday and Tuesday. And the other fun thing is, although I said I would not buy any more needlepoint kits or needlework kits, there was one that was posted on a website that was teacups. And so many of you know that I have a rather extensive collection of cups. So after this meeting, I'm
Nice. I'd like to use the good news time just to mention something in our current issue of Rotary. Every Rotarian receives Rotary, the Rotary magazine. And in it this month is a history of vaccination. So it's a very good history of vaccination. My wish would be, as the government talks about putting a mask in every household, they could put this, a copy of this, a reprint of this in every household, because you hear people say, I've never had a vaccination. I'm not going to have a vaccination. But I think anybody reading this would realize they really have had vaccinations before. And so it would serve as a piece for us in talking with others in a very non-combative way about vaccinations that people might have had, to make them realize they don't necessarily want to be a resistor. So anyway, I just wanted to point out to everyone, it's in their Rotary magazine. Thank you.
It's Mike. I got something. So last night, Felix Neil Sapp was born, my first grandchild. So out in Santa Cruz, California, and everybody's doing well. So can't wait to get out and see him. And kind of funny. So I owe $1 a pound, and we round up. He's 6.5 pounds. We started that tradition when my daughter Chelsea was born 34 years ago, and that's when we started with the $1 a pound when a child or grandchild was born. So this will be the first second generation one, I guess. Anyway, go ahead.
I guess that's a tough one to follow, and we don't have any more. So I'll go back to sharing my screen. Congratulations, Mike, on the grandchild. Sergeant at Arms, I heard Carl Flowers levying some fines earlier today, and Gail is not on the call, so I guess Carl volunteered to do that. You have anything to touch on, Carl? You are muted, sir.
Not necessarily volunteering to be the sergeant at arms, although I did serve in that role in my first time around in the Rotary 20 years ago when Harvey was the sergeant at arms and I was the assistant sergeant at arms. So I won't levy any fines today, but as Faith had indicated, those of you who were pictured in the Paul Simon event know who you are rather. So if you were there at that point, you may take it up on yourself to find yourself for a good cause. And that's it for me.
Sharon, are you waving? You've got something to say?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll have to find myself because we had some activity around here this morning that was out of the ordinary and I forgot. So I wanted to come on to Rotary and finish the program and remind everyone about our flashlight and battery drive. My understanding is that we got a huge delivery yesterday. So we're well on our way, and please go by Mike Harris Country Financial, which is just west of the Main Street and Wall Street. He's got a big box there. He has a bag of goodies for you if you bring in flashlights, and he is going to help us meet our goals. So this is very important, especially as we get toward warmer weather and people might be out needing those flashlights a lot more. So.
All right, now it's time for our guest speaker. I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Linden with the Illinois Public Health Association, to discuss the census. I will stop my share and then I'll give you permissions here to be able to share yours, because you said you got a couple things to work on there. So there you go. You have the ability and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm trying to figure out where my share button is.
It should be a green button at the bottom of your screen.
Oh, okay. I was looking for it at the top. Sorry. Okay. All right. Let's share that. Okay. There we go. All right. Well, again, thank you, folks, for allowing me to speak with you today. I was the Census Program Director for the 20 southernmost counties in Illinois. And as you no doubt are aware, there was considerable emphasis in 2019 and 2020 placed on getting out the count for the 2020 census. And IPHA was one of 12 organizations across the state that was tasked with not only census education, but reaching hard to count populations. The incentive was basically the amount of money, the billions of dollars that come to every state through federal pass-through grants. And while it isn't coming from the census directly, that money is all derived from census numbers. And because Illinois had made some rather poor showings in previous years, the governor awarded $29 million to the state to encourage and to help the organizations like IPHA encourage not only individuals, but organizations. We work predominantly with health departments. And our goal was, of course, to reach these hard to counts as well as the population in general. And who are the hard to counts that I'm talking about? Well, they're basically the entire population of Southern Illinois. If you want to get right down to it, it's children under 5, it's people who are undocumented, it's people whose English proficiency might not be what they consider adequate. It's people who perhaps are homeless, it's people who live in rural areas, it's people who distrust government. And historically, these have always been sort of reluctant to participate in the census, but between apathy and just people forgetting the importance of the census, their participation became even more valuable. And another reason that they were of so much value is because the individuals like those I just listed are often the ones who really have to count on the kinds of programs that we're talking about. Self-response in 2010 was only 57%. And according to a study that was done by George Washington University in 2015, that put us at a serious shortfall as far as money that might have come to us through the government. This figure here of $1,000 annually per person not counted is just a wide, US general in Illinois. Southern Illinois, we were looking at 987, closer to Chicago, 1,800 to 2,000. And I broke this down for Jackson County because I thought this might really be important to all of you. The fact that Jackson County potentially lost about $10 million a year in federal monies. And when I talk about the programs for those monies, I'm talking about things like Medicare, Medicaid, WIC. I'm talking about things as broad as streets, roads, bridges, schools, you know, all kinds of medical and mental health programs that all of us ultimately depend on, and certainly those that we're calling hard to count often require. So how did Illinois do? In spite of COVID, in spite of trying to make census a political issue, in spite of all the misinformation that was out there, and in spite of the fact that our deadline changed, it seemed like every other day, the state of Illinois came in number 7 in the country. And you look at that 71.4%, that's really pretty phenomenal. And when you look at the most populous states in the union, Illinois came out number 1. California and Florida were down around 6 or 7. I think New York was somewhere in the top 10. But Illinois coming in first says a lot about the efforts of all the people who were working on this. Mr. Flowers, I'm calling you out because I know how hard Carl worked on this. And not that he did it single-handed, but I know that Carl and his crew put just enormous effort into this. And a lot of our good numbers in the state are thanks to Carl and people like Carl that were as dedicated and committed to this as he was. Across our region, how did we do? Just looking at region to region and the way that we were separated in this matrix. Of course, suburban Cook and the collar counties were at the top. 2 reasons. This is largely white collar jobs, a lot of really good, strong employment, and the fact that it didn't matter where you were in those areas, you had internet access. And we're going to talk more about that as I go along. Southern Illinois came down aggregate at 65.6%. Again, that was in spite of the fact that so much of our population falls into those hard to count communities, and the fact that we have counties in Southern Illinois with spotty at best internet service, and in some cases, some portions of our counties that are between 25 and 75% without internet access. I threw this slide in just because I thought it was interesting. This kind of shows the population shift in the last 10 years in the state of Illinois. The darkest red that you see are predominantly counties who have lost a lot of manufacturing jobs. The more pumpkin-y colors, it's manufacturing jobs, it's farming communities that aren't farming anymore. It's a lot of rural areas. And then the lighter colors, like we see in Champaign County and up around Cook and the collars. Again, these are the white collar jobs. This is where we have gained population. We're always hearing about population shifts in a state. This kind of gives us a look at just how Illinois has changed in the last 10 years. The shifts in our ethnic mix, and more to the point, the shifts in some of those things that we measure in the census. Poverty rate has gone down, great. Median income gone up, also great. We are an aging population. This entire country is an aging population, so this is no surprise. We have a really nice increase in the number of people who have college degrees. This is just another breakdown. Now, this is all stuff that we've been able to see from the very earliest, I don't even want to call it analysis, because the deep analysis that the census will go through over the next couple of years has only just begun. And that's going to give us, you know, the really important information about who we are overall as a state and how apportionments and redistricting and all that kind of stuff is going to occur. I understand you have someone in the next couple of weeks who's going to be visiting with you about that, who is an expert. And so I'm not even going to pretend to be, and I'm not even going to talk about it. So anyway, this just shows generally who is participating in the census, again, who is not. We have our minority populations, the Hispanic Latino at 58.6%. That could be, again, lack of English proficiency. It could be because of rural. It could be because of distrust in government, any number of things. And this is our region broken down into population shift. We see the worst in parts of Johnson County and Alexander County. No surprise there. Again, the pumpkin, very rural areas. Maybe manufacturing jobs have been lost. Maybe people are leaving their farms. Maybe people are abandoning their farms. And a few bright spots in here where we're gaining population. Again, parts of Johnson County. We have a small spot in Williamson, a few small areas in Sinclair, tiny area in Madison, and the tiniest up here in Monroe. And my guess is that in Monroe, at least, it's people who probably work in St. Louis and are taking advantage of a little bit more job opportunity on that side of the river. Another look at our counties in our southernmost 20, 164,000 households. And this is how our self-response rates broke down. Jefferson County led the charge of these 20 counties, and Hardin came in at the end at 34.7. Anyone who hears me talk about the census is not going to miss my plea about acknowledging the digital divide that exists in Southern Illinois. I think if one good thing came out of the census, it is the fact that not only our state, but our entire country had to face the fact that there are enormous segments of our population nationwide and certainly statewide who do not have internet access. I'm not talking about internet being expensive. I am talking about it just not being there. As I alluded to earlier, down in Alexander, Pulaski, Hardin, we have maybe parts of those counties, 75% of the population of those counties does not even have internet access. Up toward Wabash, Edwards, that whole area along the Indiana border, we're looking at about 25 to 50 that do not have internet access. And I pretty much defy you to find any county in the southern 20 that does not at least have a pocket of its population, one of its census tracts, that is lacking up to 20% without internet access. Now, this was bad enough in census, which, as you might recall, was the first that we were able to do electronically. Many people had to wait until July and August before they could even do their census forms. But then when you throw in COVID and the fact that we had so many children trying to learn at home, so many people trying to work from home, this lack of internet accessibility really became huge. Our hardest to count, lowest responses in the state. I'm sorry to say Jackson was in there, this little line right here, right above the blue line in Pulaski. Not sure what that's all about. This is your territory, folks, because this is not a rural county. And so many of these, I think almost every other one in this group was.
I have a quick question about that.
Yes, sir.
If you could go back to that last slide.
Okay.
Could that be attributed to the amount of college students who were leaving during the time that they did that census? I know I live in an apartment in condo complex, and we had people that would repeat. We had census workers who would come knock on our door and ask us who lives in this place because nobody's there and they're not responding. I think of the 6 townhouses that are very close to mine, 4 of them are rotation annually. So if those people didn't answer right away, I don't know if they were just underrepresented because of that, or maybe that increases the response rate. But is that something that is considered every time they do a census, or could be in the future, to say what's the actual time frame we have? Because as it continued to get pushed on, people moved. I had people that said that I had neighbors that said, well, I already did the census. I did it when I lived in Champaign going to college at U of I, and now I'm a grad student here at SIU, and they're asking me to do the census again. When and where am I supposed to do that?
Great question. I have no doubt that had some impact, but for any number of reasons, Jackson County is notoriously well behind the rest of the urbanized counties in the state. I don't know the answer to that. I think at some point, the whole understanding of where you should do the census has gotten lost, because college students, perhaps in previous decades, mom and dad, regardless of where mom and dad lived, mom and dad counted that college student where mom and dad are. The one thing that was emphasized, another thing that was emphasized this year, was that wherever you were standing on April 1st was where you were supposed to be doing your census. And of course, that was based on the likelihood that you were going to be there the majority of your time. And for college students, they might be the majority of their time in Carbondale. They might still get their mail where mom and dad are. And on April 1st, they may be in Fort Lauderdale on the beach. So, there was some disconnect in that, but Jackson County was one of those that was looked at very carefully, because historically they do end up with a fairly low count. And I'm hoping between now and 10 years from now, they will look much more carefully at what that might be, whether it's just a need to better educate college students on where they need to do their census, or if maybe there's just something else missing there that we're not seeing yet. But thank you.
I think this year it was especially exacerbated because
sure.
we had neighbors that left March 15th and never came back. They had their apartments still had all their stuff in them. They had already moved home, and they were going to school remotely. So I think anywhere that had a college town, whether Illinois or across the country, probably had similar issues.
I'm sure you're right. And as the time went on, I mean, how many businesses do we know of that had to close temporarily, if not permanently? There's nothing that can be said that would exaggerate the difficulty of doing the census this year, which is again why I think Illinois, that had been so pitifully sad at 57% 10 years ago in their self-response, managed to get to 71.4 in self-response this year. I think that puts a great big, round of applause for people like Carl and all of the people that worked in the southern part of our state, as well as the entire state. But I wanted to leave this on a really, really positive note, not just about Carl, but about everybody. Altogether, we know that in the southern part of the state, we were talking to at least 100,000 people. That does not mean they all did their census. Most likely they did not. But people were stopped in, you know, while they went about their business, people were out there with their masks on and their census information, and they were stopping people to talk to them, to try to educate them as to why this year the census was so important. There's a few pictures here. Yard signs were popping up everywhere. In Anna, they had an art competition in the elementary school, and the art winners were put on the sides of buses. Their pictures were put on the sides of buses, not the winners themselves. As soon as we were able to get out the door, people were putting out tables and offering census swag, and hey, come over and talk to me and I'll give you a water bottle or a mask or whatever it turned out to be. We had, just in our southern 20 counties, we had over 1,800 locations where people could get census information. And that was restaurants, that was restaurants, firehouses, city halls, almost any kind of business. I mean, people came up with very creative ways, like table toppers, even placemats that they were creating for restaurants that use paper placemats. Every door direct mailings were going out thousands and thousands and thousands per week. And I have to always give kudos to one of our local mayors. I don't know how many of you know Jason Ashmore from Cesar, but in all of his efforts, he more than doubled his 2010 numbers, which were down in the 30s, I believe, and low 30s. And he ended up at nearly 70% this year, just in his small community, between Facebook challenges and all the different events that, even if he was the only event, it was out there wearing a costume, walking down the street with a bullhorn, putting out yard signs and having people show him putting out yard signs. It was not by any means a one-man effort, but he certainly worked very hard at doing this. And I want to leave you again with just some things that we kind of mentioned, the fact that census education can't stop because the census has stopped. And I think one of the most incredible things that came out of the census that I see continue, and that even once we get past this COVID nightmare, I'm hoping continues. And that was that there was a real sense of community being built in Southern Illinois. Our counties were working together, our cities were working together. People who didn't know each other were coming together and trying to figure out how to bring up this count. And the whole sense of family became not just who you were related to, but the people next door, down the street, around the corner, people in the next town, people in the next county. And in order to come up with the kind of numbers we did ultimately in Illinois, we all had to have been embracing this idea that we are all in this together, that all of us matter, that I count, we count, and if I don't count, nobody counts. We've all got to pull this out of the fire together. And I'm hoping above hope that this is something that will continue. I think this is the kind of thing that fosters an organization like Rotary. And I'm going to leave it in your hands to continue to drive the importance of community and to help us deliver a really fantastic census in 2030. And I thank you for your time. I'm open to more questions.
This is Gail Cronin. I got a question. How do you determine response rate? You know how this, you know how many people respond, but how do you know how many didn't as a percentage? So you know 71% of the state self-reported. How do you know there were 29% that didn't?
The rest of those numbers, that is such an awesome question. The rest of those numbers basically come from population estimates. They come from IRS estimates of population size. One of the things that occurs usually a year before the census, and actually did occur not quite a year, but about 6 or 8 months before the census, is that census mappers go throughout cities, counties, rural areas, and look for homes that are occupied. And those numbers then go back to a computer that verifies that that home was occupied 10 years ago and there were 4 people there. Or that says, no, there was no one living there 4 years ago, or whatever the case may be. Maybe if it's a whole new subdivision, which we saw a lot in my area, we might even knock on doors while we're mapping. And, congratulations on your new home. You weren't here 10 years ago. How many are in the house? But ultimately there is and it's not 100% accurate, but we do get a really solid estimate beforehand on how many people are still here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember whether it was 2000 census or 2010, Carbondale population was transplanted somehow to a neighboring city. I think it was Murfreesboro for a while, at least it was coded wrong or something. But I don't know whether that explains some of Jackson County's problems or not. I don't know.
I honestly can't speak to that. But it's definitely an interesting dilemma. I'm sure it's not the only one that gets transponded, as you say, because Murfreesboro and Carbondale seem to almost be blending. To my ignorant eyes, just driving in and out of here and not being that familiar with the area. Anyone else?
So we're
Linden, your last recommendation, convene an advisory committee. Are you suggesting municipalities or some government entity, or how do you see that in general about advisory committees in the areas?
I would think that we could at best, first of all, to answer your question, all of the above. I would think cities and counties and, government entities could begin planning and then inviting organizations in their area to join into something akin to a complete count committee, which is what the census called it before. And no, you're not going to go out there and start counting, but you look at what went right this year, you look at what might have gone better, and you maybe start a little bit of census education ahead of time. So it all doesn't have to come together at once at the end, where you're trying to dispel rumors and take the politics out of it and, deal with other things. At the same time, you're trying to help people remember why they did the census in the first place.
So does the census accept reports, recommendations from those advisory committees at some point before they embark on the next census?
Another great question. One would hope so. I think this year probably saw the biggest push from any other year. I don't remember anybody in 2010 getting all excited about the census. It just kind of came and went, and I think we were in the middle of a financial crisis at the time. So, it just got pushed off and pushed off and pushed off to the point that even the census didn't get excited about the census initially. And, the census even got off to a late start, which was unfortunate. But I would like to think that as a way to avoid having these massive expenditures to get people to go out and do their census, that the Census Bureau would learn from all of this and just start encouraging people and maybe offering some ideas about how to bring people together and talk about the census early on.
Thank you.
I see that I'm supposed to have, there was something in chat, but I didn't get to see anything that was in there. Anything else? Okay, well, I thank you again for your attention, for your questions, for inviting me. This was just such a phenomenal experience working with all of these great people and seeing beautiful parts of our state that I had never seen before. And I hope I'm still up and kicking 6 or 3 or 2 or however many years it is from now when we start working on the next census, because I think one of the greatest resources we will have for the next census, which goes on to Ms. Lacey's statement, is actually starting to prepare for it early. And those of us who went through all of this will know what worked and what didn't, and will realize that waiting till the last minute was probably not the smartest choice, as it rarely is. But anyway, and thank you, Mr. Morse, for allowing me to take over your meeting.
Thank you for joining us. This was with all the efforts that were put in this year. This was definitely a beneficial presentation. And I think we were all very curious to find out what those results are, and I appreciate you coming and joining us today.
Okay. Well, thank you all.
So next week, we will have Deborah Barnett of the SIU Innovation Lab. April 14th, Marcia Griffin, Illinois Attorney General Community Outreach Liaison, to discuss identity theft and scams, which I'm amazed by the amount of scams that are out there, and I'm really excited to hear what she's got to say. April 21st will be Rebecca O'Neill with SIU Legal Clinics, and April 28th, Sandra Langley of the John A. Logan Literacy Program. So thank you to our programming committee and Linda Flowers for getting those all lined up for us. Now it's time for the four-way test, and Linda Flowers signed up to do that for us this week. So Linda Flowers, would you please lead us in the four-way test?
Yes, please join me in the four-way test of what we think, say, or do. Number 1.
Is it the truth?
Number 2.
Is it
fair to all concerned?
Number 3.
Will it
build
better
and better friendships?
And last, number 4.
Will it be
beneficial
to all concerned?
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for leading us today in the four-way test. And we hope to see you all again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.